Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our very good friend, Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John.
You doing okay today?
Doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, just fine, and doing a lot better than I would imagine than a lot of residents are in Hong Kong as we speak.
Yep.
As we all know, everyone listening to this probably knows, China is trying to exert increasingly great authority over the Hong Kong government and therefore the Hong Kong economy.
The people, the economy, really everything. I mean, bigger security measures. I mean, we've had this, one country, two systems, I think is what they call it, kind of policy going on there. And it's always probably been a little shady, and, they've probably blurred the lines here and there of what that actually is supposed to mean. But that seems to be, I mean, we had all those protests last year before coronavirus. That was one of the big topics in the news was how bad the Chinese markets were being hit and the Asian markets really because of this. And that's kind of sneaking back up into the news a little bit. I mean, with everything going on, I mean, coronavirus. This has just kind of snuck up into the news a little bit. And it could have a pretty seismic impact on financial markets with how big of an financial economy Hong Kong is.
Well, you're certainly right about that. Hong Kong has long been the financial capital of Asia. Well, maybe the people in Tokyo would disagree with me on that, but Hong Kong has been important. No one can take that away. However, I would tell you, Sam, that as troubling as this might be to the overall global state of things, I've been actually kind of amazed that the one country, two systems has lasted, frankly, as long as it has since 1997 to here we are in 2020. Because I remember when watching the handover, I truly watched the highlights and all that stuff. I was saying, this is going to last for a couple of years at best. And what is anyone really going to do about it? Probably not that much of anything. But Beijing, to its credit, I mean, realized it was underdeveloped at the time and needed Hong Kong more than I think Hong Kong needed Beijing. So now all of a sudden, two and a half decades almost later, China's economic growth has been nothing short of miraculous. And now Beijing's maybe thinking, we don't need Hong Kong as much as we needed them, 25 years ago. And Beijing's feeling like it's dealing with a position of strength. So I would imagine, I don't think it's coincidental that Xi is doing this while the remainder of the world is preoccupied with something completely different.
Yep, I was going to get to that. I mean, it's a pretty convenient time, and but like you mentioned, 1997. China's growth story over these, 23 years has been just miraculous. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. They've blown it out of the water, any sort of growth expectations for a country of their size and what they've been able to do. And maybe some of those numbers are fluff, but I mean, you look at just the country as a whole and they have boomed. Their economy's boomed, and the upper hand probably changed a little bit from 1997 to today.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's nothing that you said that anyone could refute. I mean, it's absolutely 100% spot on. And, it does remain to be seen what happens if all of a sudden Beijing takes over Hong Kong to the degree that I think Beijing probably wants to do. This is just another step of many in making Hong Kong just any other province or prefecture or whatever they call it, I believe province in China. But then, it also begs a bigger picture. If the Chinese are going to do this to Hong Kong and threaten the Asian financial markets with this, what is the ultimate goal of the Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese have and going in and building out infrastructure in places like Africa and Latin America in exchange for royalties from natural resources like crude oil and gold? Sam, I'm kind of wondering that if Xi thinks he can get away with this while everyone's focused on the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe Beijing thinks they might be able to get away with absconding with or taking over some natural resources in Africa and Latin America while everyone is, again, preoccupied with COVID-19.
I mean, you think I mentioned that we had kind of this was the focal point of the news probably, before this happened. And for a while, everyone was so focused on the protests in Hong Kong, how long they're lasting, how long they're going on. And there was enough pushback that it seemed like the Chinese stepped back a little bit from it. And I mean, conveniently, peculiarly, the coronavirus comes in, everybody across the world's focused on it, and they kind of reinitiate it a little bit. They go in again and say, maybe we don't need this one country, two system policy anymore. And I also think it's a little peculiar that this is going on in a time where their GDP, their growth has been kind of weakening a little bit. It's kind of if from Xi's perspective, you look at it and I mean, I don't agree with it, but it makes sense from his perspective that now, if you're going to do it, it's a good time to be doing it.
So, Sam, I'm going to throw this out here to you. I mean, are you someone that has stockpiled a bunch of ammunition and weapons in your house and think that maybe the Chinese grew this in a lab in Wuhan to get everyone preoccupied with themselves so they could take over Hong Kong?
That is not what I am getting at.
We're throwing that out there. We're not saying that's the case, but
I forgot my tinfoil hat.
But it is kind of interesting. I mean, when you think about it, I wouldn't be surprised if conspiracy theorists did ultimately come to that conclusion, because after all, Sam, China only has 85,000 cases of the COVID-19 pandemic about the same time that they're really ratcheting up the screws on Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly China itself is not preoccupied with the COVID-19 virus because so few of them have it over there. So why not be more preoccupied with absorbing Hong Kong? And then while you're at it, why not take over a little Macau, huh?
Yeah.
And then
casinos.
You want little casinos. You got textiles, finances, and casinos. And then if the Chinese are going to do that, which I don't think anyone in the world is going to raise an eyebrow at, truthfully. I mean, the United States is, send a carrier group over there, but we're not going to get into a hot war with the Chinese over Macau or even over Hong Kong. I dare say that. A lot of condemnations, but very few bullets, if you catch my drift.
Yeah.
But then when the world acquiesces to this, does the world acquiesce to the rattling of sabers with the Taiwanese, or a Chinese takeover outright of the Spratly Islands in direct conflict with the Filipinos? I mean, what is China's end game here if the first domino, if you will, first piece of the jigsaw puzzle, if you will, throw whatever cliche you want at it, if Hong Kong's it, does this embolden Xi to, again, go to Macau, to go to the Spratly Islands, to take over other small islands and what have you?
Yeah, I mean, in Hong Kong, it may be a small island, but it's a weighty place. I mean, it's a powerful place. I mean, do you think this is Xi looking at it saying, okay, our economy's kind of pulling back a little, our GDP is sinking a little bit, weakest numbers we've had in decades? Do you think this would be kind of a way to, in their eyes, revamp their economy and kind of change how things have been going and maybe boost that their growth numbers back up to where they have been?
I don't think Xi's actually looking at this from a economic stake at all. I think that he's viewing it as from a situation that, this used to be a Chinese colony. It was embarrassing it was a Chinese colony. And why in the hell are we still agreeing to something with the British that we signed almost a quarter century ago, allowing two systems? We're a big, strong country. Why are we acquiescing to this where we're going to have something different down here just because that's what the British said? Are the British actually going to come back and demand Hong Kong again? And if they do, okay, so what? So I would imagine it's more. It
reminds me of some other historical time period.
So I think it's more due to a saving of face. Hong Kong is part of China. It's not separate from China. It's so that's what I think Xi is more focused on. If he can get the population focused on taking over Hong Kong, getting rid of the two systems, China eventually throwing off the yoke of European colonialism and imperialism, and saying, hey, we're all one big happy family, that is going to play incredibly well with the vast majority of people in the People's Republic. And that's what people do, that's what politicians do, what big men do when the economy starts to slow a little bit.
Yeah,
they're trying to divert other people's attention.
And we've seen this kind of throughout history. I mean, in the 1930s, when Germany was trying to take over some of the land that they previously felt was theirs, and treaties before, they look back at it now and say, we're not the country that agreed to this contract anymore. Why don't we take back what is ours? And it may not be from the same militaristic standpoint that Germany was looking at it. But I think there's other examples of that through time, and I think that's kind of what we're going to be seeing is China maybe trying to take back what they historically feel is theirs.
And I think that's probably more the case than actually Xi thinking that there's any sort of significant economic impact from this. And while Hong Kong is obviously a bastion of capitalism in Asia, and it's an important financial center, and it's got a stock market that is much more important than the size of the economy would suggest, when you do all that, throw it all up there, Hong Kong itself would be only a fraction of overall GDP for the People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
So it is the mouse that roared in that regard. So economically speaking, I don't think that's Xi's deal. Again, I think it's ultimately, I'm trying to focus people's attention on this over here, getting rid of the last remnants of colonialism. Taking control of our own destiny. And what is scary about that is takes over Hong Kong. Macau's next. Macau's next. And then, seriously, does Beijing turn its sights on Taipei? And what would the American response be there, particularly considering we don't have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, because we have it with the People's Republic in Beijing? What happens, and how does the world react if Xi were to decide to invade Taiwan?
Yeah. Well, we don't have to look back even a century to see how we've kind of reacted to things like that previously, and it's hard for me to imagine. Those are kind of a little easier to brush off. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, and it's hard to imagine us doing a whole lot to stop it, honestly, in my opinion.
So I agree with you on that. So ultimately, I think maybe, just maybe, one of the outcomes of this COVID-19 pandemic is the fact that China is going to flex its imperial muscle a little bit. While other people are distracted, while the G7, while the United States has saddled their economies with mushroomed levels of debt in order to stave off a sharp economic contraction, while we're inwardly focused, China is silently gobbling up territories.
Do you think that it would end at a kind of historical what they think is theirs, or do you envision it becoming...
In terms of actual territory, I do probably think so. China throughout history, while it has been an empire, was generally more focused on China itself. The Ming emperors were far more focused on the Middle Kingdom than going out and actually conquering territory.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen, post-pandemic, is what you will see the Chinese do is economic colonialism as opposed to outright colonialism. And the Belt and Road Initiative, as you well know about, they will literally start taking over some of the natural resources in some of these poorly run African and even Latin American countries, and there'll be a much hue and cry. But I really don't think the United States or the G7 is going to be willing to go to war with China
over Taiwan.
If not over Taiwan, then certainly not over the diamond fields in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Or bauxite mines someplace else.
Yeah.
I don't think we're prepared to do that.
No, I agree.
As a result, I think the Chinese do develop that economic colonialism as opposed to outright taking over, conquering, putting in governments and what have you, which the Europeans proved was kind of a costly endeavor.
Sure.
Why not just take the natural resources?
Take what you came for.
Take what you came for and not worry about governing the people.
Yeah.
So that's what I think
seems
ultimately.
A little smarter than trying.
And so that's essentially what I think Xi is. Yeah, I think this with Hong Kong right now is probably the first step. Noticeable step in how the Belt and Road Initiative was ultimately going to pan out anyhow.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see what China's end game is here. They don't view themselves as a poor, backward country any longer. They realize they are a global economic power and increasingly a global military power. Who's going to stop us if we want to do this?
Yeah.
And, biting off Hong Kong, gee whiz. It's a pretty big bite, but at the same time, I think Xi is calculating if you do this in small pieces, no one's going to notice until the inevitable is already upon us, and no one's going to push back on it.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is going on in Hong Kong, and picked a pretty clever time.
Yeah. Yep.
You got to hand your hat to him. I don't want John going over there, fighting over Hong Kong. I don't want you going over there fighting over Hong Kong. And they don't want me going over there and fighting over Hong Kong. What do you think about that?
I agree.
So I'm not sure we're trading perspectives here today, but it is kind of interesting, and the headlines will see exactly what plays out. But Sam, I'd be very surprised if it's terribly different than what we're discussing here today.
Yeah.
I mean, I really would be terribly surprised by that.
No, I'm with you.
So with that, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. You can always send us an email to tradingperspectives@oakworthcapital.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. If you're interested in hearing more or reading more of what we have to say, you can check out our blog Common Sense at oakworthcapital.com underneath the Thought Leadership tab. And also, Sam, underneath the Thought Leadership tab is our series on the new normal.
Yep.
So we've got 2 more pieces coming out next week, which should be pretty good. So by all means, go on out there and take a look at that. Sam, I'm going to give you the last chance.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.